in Madness by Phyllis Chesler. When is a woman mad, and who decides whether she is? $1973. 1973, bruv. Let's put this in the title, and we'll open this shit and get on with this fabulous book. Yes, that's what we'll do. All right, we shall open this, and then we shall do this, bruv, before I eat some lunch. Women in Madness, and I know that I was going to read Flying Saucer books this month, but when I made a video on one such book, a live cast that is, it saved a 4-minute fragment of that broadcast out of 30 or 40 minutes, so I don't know if there was a copyright infringement or what, but I just said, F it, I'm going with a different book. It gave me an uneasy feeling. Women and Madness by Phyllis Chesler. Had this book for several years. Don't remember where I got it, but looks like 1973. Guess we could read the back and see what it says. A stunning book, absolutely fascinating and necessary to every woman in America. Every year, hundreds of thousands of American women seek or are forced to receive some form of mental health care, either in institutions or through private therapy. From the time of Sigmund Freud to the present day, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and psychologists have been treating or committing women for depression, suicidal behavior and anxiety, or for aggressiveness, angry behavior, and a stubborn refusal to conform. For the most part, these professionals have been and still are white, middle class, and most important, male. Now, Phyllis Chesler, a qualified psychologist and a concerned feminist, brings an impassioned indictment against the century of psychiatric theory and practice. She calls upon the personal and moving testimony of women of all ages and social backgrounds who have been institutionalized or privately treated. Dr. Chesler's controversial interpretation and her mandate for a new unconventional female psychology offer new hope to every woman in our society. Of course, this, as I said, this is from 1973. First published in 72. Well, let's see what, all right, there's a Doris Lessing quote to start off the book. They all looked half drugged or half asleep, dull, as if the creatures had been hypnotized or poisoned. For these people walked in their fouled and disgusting streets full of ordure and bits of refuse and paper, as if they were not conscious of their existence here, were somewhere else, and they were somewhere else. Each was occupied in imagining how it, he, she was triumphing in an altercation with the landlord, or the grocer, or a colleague, or how it was making love. It was painful in a way she had never known pain, an affliction of shameful grief. To walk here today among our own kind, looking at them as they were, seeing them, us, the human race, as visitors from a spaceship might see them. But the most frightening thing about them was this, that they walked and moved and went about their lives in a condition of sleepwalking. They were not aware of themselves, of other people, of what went on around them. They were essentially isolated, shut in, enclosed inside their hideously defective bodies, behind their dreaming, drugged eyes, above all, inside a net of wants and needs that made it possible for them to think of anything else. Are you with me, brovs? I'll probably skip the acknowledgments because it's usually people nobody's ever heard of. Introduction, the contents: why madness, women in asylums, mothers and daughters, heroines in madness, asylums, the clinicians, the female career as a psychiatric patient, women. Chapter 5, sex between patient and therapist. Jesus Christ. Psychiatrically institutionalized women, lesbians. Whoa, we got a whole chapter on lesbians. Too bad it's only 22 pages. Third world women. Chapter 9, feminist. And I think they did say that Chesler considered herself a feminist. I don't know if she's still alive or not. Read that one, this book? Yeah, I am going to read it. Oh, you want me to read the lesbians? I could just skip ahead and read 22 pages about lesbians. Why not? Chapter 7, page 191. Why wait for weeks when you can just go right to the lesbian? Chapter 7, lesbians. The repudiation of the mother by every female, as the culture demands her capitulation to the male, must surely be the cruelest sacrifice in the catalogue of compromise which constitutes a civilization at war with itself and the repression of its own instinctual freedoms. The culture is a caricature of biological differences, our first and last outpost of resistance to psychic integration, the maintenance of the illusion of two separate and distinct sexes in their grossly caricatured family political manifestations. Plastic lady and palooka man are two sexes polarized at their distorted extremes to protect their own disease. The rest of us participate in the disease by going down with the ship in resignation or protest or subversion down under the hold. That's where the lesbians and homosexuals have been hanging out all these centuries. In the subterranean passages of the mind, all women are lesbians except those who don't know it. Until women see in each the possibility of a primal commitment, which includes sexual love, they will be denying themselves the love and value they readily accord to men, thus affirming their second-class status. Jill Johnston. I want to know what this footnote is. Where's the footnote at? Oh, no, that isn't it. I don't know. I'm not looking for the footnote. The love of women for their own sex was equivalent to Orphic homosexuality. Here again, the sole purpose was to transcend the lower sensuality, to make beauty into a purified psychic beauty. In Sappho's strivings to elevate her sex, she was concerned not with one alone. Eros drove her to them all. Wherever she found physical beauty, Eros impelled her to create spiritual beauty as well. In the presence of this idea, she came to look with indifference on everything she had valued as a young girl: wealth, jewels, the ornaments of outward sweet existence. J.H. Bachhofen. When a couple is new to swinging and the woman has never been exposed to another woman, she usually says that she would find this repulsive and cannot imagine it. After the first 2 or 3 parties where she sees women obviously enjoying each other, she is likely to modify her stand and say, I do enjoy having a woman work on me, but I could never be active with another woman. Then, when she has been in swinging for several months and attended many parties, she may well say, I enjoy everything and anything with a woman, either way she wants to go. At large open parties, we observed that almost all the women were engaged in homosexual activity with obvious satisfaction, especially if a younger girl was involved. Gilbert D. Bartel. Most psychoanalytic theorists either sincerely misunderstand or severely condemn lesbianism. Some do both. The condition, they say, is biologically and or hormonally based. No, say others, it is really an environmental phenomenon. In any event, all agree it is maladaptive, regressive, and infantile. Even if it isn't, it leads to undeniable suffering and is therefore maladaptive, regressive, etc. And we'll read the footnote. Psychoanalysts are generally no different from most people in their values of pleasure rather than pain, and in their definitions of what constitutes each experience. More moderate voices suggest that lesbianism is not infantile, just limited. We are bisexual by nature, they say, in conditioning society, the patriarchal family cripples and restricts both women and men to heterosexuality. Bolder voices disagree. Women are naturally more bisexual as well as more sensual than men. From a physiological point of view, women are better sexual and emotional love partners for each other than father men. What the fuck is a father man? Than father men can be to them. I don't like that term right there. Still, bolder voices reject the supposedly advanced view of our bisexuality. No, they say, in our culture, bisexuality for women is limited. In a frantic compromise is a blatant and cowardly cop-out. Dr. Charlotte Wolfe, in her book, Love Between Women, inadvertently and only partially explains this last view in the following way. The lesbian's yearning for her mother's love is always put in jeopardy through the existence of a male. One wonders why lesbians are so much resented by men and women. Because of the pride and vanity of the male, only few men would consider lesbians to be serious rivals. Men's dislike of them goes back to a fundamental psychological cause, the need for the mother in a woman. The male wants to be fed by the female. He needs ego support throughout his life. A lesbian who feeds, loves another woman, puts him and the world into chaos. She is a rival because she takes away maternal support, which should be his, not hers. All right. How you liking it, Blairu? Are you even still here? Blairu. Who the hell's even there? Nobody. Participants. No, it's just me. Blairu left. Coward. I am Blairu. All right, back to it. Women in madness. Lesbians. Live chat. All messages are visible. There we go. That's what we want. Live chat. Right. All right. Women who feed both men and women cannot successfully feed the long-starving and often swollen-bellied women in patriarchal society. From a psychological point of view, it is only women who can make up to each other for their lack of mothering. All this moment in history, only women can, if they will, support the entry or re-entry of women into the human race. In order for most women to overthrow their feminine conditioning, women must receive the kind of emotional, sexual, economic, and intellectual support from others, both older and younger than themselves, that men do. Let's read the footnote. I am not suggesting that either the means or goals of feminism will necessarily be accomplished by women becoming lesbians or by women following lifestyles or indicates of pre-feminist lesbians. All right. Sure sounds like it. Many researcher clinicians have confused or equated lesbianism with male homosexuality. Many researchers have also studied and sympathized more with the latter than with the former group of patients. Most have not sympathized at all. Merle Miller came out in the New York Times in 1971. Some of the letters he received from psychiatrists had the following advice. While I sympathize with Mr. Miller's failure to be cured of the disease and feel that homosexuals have the same civil rights as anyone else, they also have the right to try and get treatment for their illness. Another psychiatrist offered to counsel Miller free of charge because it is clear from your tone that you are in desperate, even frantic need of help. All right, back to the text. Of course, since whatever men do is considered more important than anything that women do, male homosexuality has certainly been more overtly punished, socially, legally, and economically than lesbianism has. Probably the fear of male physical force coupled with male sexual aggressiveness is an important factor here. Male homosexuals are perceived as potentially combining these two forms of force and using them against other, perhaps weaker or younger men. This threat is an intolerable one to men who psychologically must retain the initiative of force or action in order to be men. This same threat is, however, a daily fact of life for most women. Heterosexual men threaten all women, especially young girls, with a combination of greater physical and sexual force. All right, I'm just going to go back to the front since the original. Going back to the introduction, as we took a foray into lesbians, which Demeter revisited an introduction. In the beginning, if there was ever such a time, Demeter, the goddess of life, gave birth to 4 daughters, whom she named Persephone, Psyche, Athena, and Artemis. The world's first children were unremarkably happy. To amuse their mother, with whom they were all passionately in love, they invented language, music, laughter, and many more useful and boisterous activities. One morning, Persephone menstruated. That afternoon, Demeter's daughters gathered flowers to celebrate the loveliness of the event. A chariot thundered, then clattered into their midst. It was Hades, the middle-aged god of death, come to rape Persephone, come to carry her off to be his queen, to sit beside him in the realm of non-being below the earth. Come to commit the first act of violence Earth's children had ever known. Afterward, the 3 sisters agreed that he was old enough to be Persephone's father. Perhaps he was. Who else could he be? There were no known male parents, and thus they each discovered that in shame and sorrow, childhood ends, and that nothing remains the same. Persephone's sisters came home without her. Demeter raged and wept. Her bones seemed to shrink. Her cheeks became wrinkled. She bound up her hair and turned wanderer, but could not find her eldest daughter anywhere on earth. Finally, the sun spoke and told Demeter what had happened, that her daughter was married and a queen. He counseled her. Why mourn the natural fate of daughters, to leave their mother's home, to lose their virginity, to marry, and to give birth to children? Demeter was grieved beyond, and before reasoning, remembering an oracle's prophecy of a splitting, a scattering, and an exile, she said to the sun, "Yeah, if that be the natural fate of daughters, let all mankind perish. Let there be no crops, no grain, no corn, if this maiden is not returned to me." Because Demeter was a powerful goddess, her wishes were commands, and Persephone returned. Persephone still had to visit her husband once each year, in winter when no crops could grow, but her union with him remained a barren one. Persephone was childless, neither husband nor child. No stranger would ever claim her as his own. Persephone belonged to her mother. That was Demeter's gift to her. In those days, goddesses were still able to perform the miracle of not choosing. They were both virgins and mothers, mortal and immortal, forever the same and forever changing. I mean, just to add a addendum here, in those days, didn't exist, okay? That's mythology. All right, but sighed Persephone's sisters after they had seen everything. The maiden's helplessness and rape, the young bride's childlessness, the mother's suffering, the terrifying simplicity and repetition of it all. Yes, they said of the maiden and the mother, yes, she rules both beneath and above the earth, but she cannot keep us here any longer. Psyche was the first to speak. I am beautiful. Some say more beautiful than all my sisters, and still no man claims me as his wife. Actually, Psyche and Persephone look quite alike. You could not tell them apart. Sisters, I am longing for love. I am lonely and frightened in our mother's house. I wish a husband with strong and handsome eyes, and I wish to have a child. Athena spoke next. I am not beautiful, and care not for such things. She was in fact exceedingly beautiful, but was very tall, even for the daughter of a goddess. Sisters, my childhood is over and must be relived. I wish to be born again, and of man. I wish to plot the clash of heroes from afar, dressed in the finest armor, moved by the finest wisdom. I wish for my own wholeness, and not for children or a husband. Artemis spoke last. She too was tall and of a darker complexion than her sisters. Sisters, perhaps I wish for the impossible and will have to wander even farther than our mother did in search of it. I too want heroic clashes and great deeds, but I also want love and children. My head aches with visions of swords and altars, dazzling cities, and beautiful maidens. There is a music in my ears, strange to our mother's house. Well, as this conversation is common knowledge among schoolgirls, we know what each sister arranged for herself. Psyche went home to plead for a husband. Demeter and Persephone were astounded by such a strange desire, yet they knew it must be satisfied. In secrecy, for such a thing had never before happened. Psyche was married to Eros, to love himself, to Cupid. Aphrodite's son, Psyche, lived alone with her husband in a splendid palace set high on a nameless mountain. Silent, invisible servants brought her whatever she wished. At night, and only at night, love came to visit. Psyche's husband, but she didn't know who he was or what he looked like. Love had warned her never to look at him, but to love him in darkness. One midnight, after he had fallen asleep, Psyche lit a small oil lamp for a single guilty look and woke Love, who fled the palace. Miserable and frightened, Psyche set out to find him. After many near perilous failures, Love finally rescued his unhappy wife. He brought her to heaven to live in an even more splendid palace. There, surrounded by the immortals, Psyche, Love, and their daughter, Pleasure, lived happily forever after, the first heavenly, holy family. Athena never returned to her mother's house. Instead, she went straight to Zeus, the god of gods, and proposed a bargain, much to his vain and clever liking, to be reborn of him. She asked him to become her mother, and so Athena became twice born, the second time of man. She emerged fully grown from Zeus's head, wearing the armor she so desired. Like Persephone, Athena remained childless and fiercely loyal to her one parent. Unlike Persephone, Athena was never raped, abducted, or made a king's unwilling queen. She needs no rescuing. If there were rescuing to do, Athena herself would do it. Indeed, she rescued many a male hero, helped him slay hideous monsters, capture unattainable prizes, win great wars, and destroy ancient cities. This stately daughter of Demeter seemed to have no memory of her earthly and female origins. She never understood why certain men still insisted on sacrificing to her before planting and after harvesting. She smiled to herself. Didn't they know it was a strange tribute to one who had chosen her own parent, and in so doing, had stopped running on the wheel of repetition. Artemis, the youngest of Demeter's daughters, returned to her mother's house. First, she had Demeter consecrate her to the moon, so that no matter how far she'd have to wander, she would never forget, never betray her origins. That done, Artemis quickly perfected the arts of hunting and riding and warfare, of plant healing and midwifery. Then, with the moon for guide, she left to found a city. No, it was a tribe. No, it was a culture, the likes of which the world had never known. Every woman in it was a soldier and a mother. Tears were as common as physical bravery. Marriage was scorned, rape unthinkable, and the love of young girls praised in poems written by even the most hardened war veterans. Artemis herself had many female lovers and many daughters, such of whom founded other Amazon cities in Africa, in South America, and elsewhere in Asia. Goddesses never die. They slip in and out of the world's cities, in and out of our dreams, century after century, answering different names. Dressed differently, perhaps even disguised, perhaps idle and unemployed, their official altars abandoned, their temples feared or simply forgotten. What of Demeter and her four daughters? Demeter, the goddess of life, and Persephone, her ghostly embryonic maiden daughter, were for a long time celebrated in elaborate secret ceremonies by the most sophisticated of the ancients, and more openly by everyone else. But somehow, no one really knows why such celebrations of mothers and daughters certainly ceased. That which had gone before could no longer be worshipped. Fierce prophets proclaimed martial law against the past. Even fiercer prophets proclaimed martial law against the present. Monotheism changed the fate of mortals and immortals alike. Still, not everything changed. Mother worship shifted, ever so subtly, ever so keenly, from Demeter to her daughter Psyche. Gentle Psyche, in love with marriage, was soon enshrined as the gentle Virgin Mother Mary. Her daughter, Pleasure, became a son named Jesus, and it happened as quickly as this. Demeter was stripped of her powers, torn from her maidenhood, and exiled into history as a wretched, fearful wanderer. No longer was she a mother goddess. Now Demeter appeared only as a stepmother, often a cruel one, or as a witch, often an evil one, come to haunt children in their fairy tales and nightmares. Children cried at the sight of her. Their fathers tortured and burned her many times at the stake. And what of Persephone and Psyche and the Virgin Mary? Why, they became Cinderella, Snow White, the Sleeping Beauty, struck dumbly domestic by a Demeter turned stepmother. They all turned to princes and white knights to rescue them from this rather incomprehensible turn of events. In our time, Psyche has 3 children, but is very depressed. Lately, she never gets up before noon. The Virgin Mary is an alcoholic, hiding behind drawn shades. Persephone is frigid and worries about it. Cinderella is anxious, paces back and forth a great deal, and has twice tried to kill herself. In our time, the stepmothers wander still, exiles with no memory of what has gone before. Demeter has been known to curse at passing airplanes, to dress in shapeless mourning costumes, to talk to herself, to talk sense. Often these days, when Demeter gives birth to a child, she abandons her then and there, turning her own face to the hospital wall. Sometimes, as in a trance, Demeter tries to keep her daughter at home with her again forever. What of Artemis and Athena? Some say that Artemis and her daughter drowned in a flood, or like angels, left earth in sorrow before their work was done. Others say that after losing some very great battle, they killed themselves. Still others claim to have heard them decide to retreat, break up, and wait for better times. Even Athena, the most exceptional woman, had eventually to put away her shield and helmet and take up books, rosaries, knitting, needles, and gossip, and occasionally a royal crown or a university post. Today, both Artemis and Athena have increasingly been caught at violence, at crimes of passion, greed, even of honor. Most often they do whatever is required of them. These proud and lonely two do their jobs well, too well. Sometimes Athena, sometimes Artemis is well known for some accomplishment, envied, admired, misunderstood, until she turns on the gas, poisons herself, drowns, and is done with it once more. This is a book about female psychology, or, if you will, about the many faces of Demeter and her 4 daughters, about what has happened to them in the 20th century, and how it has been viewed and treated in psychiatric settings. Certain myths reveal a great deal about the origins and models of contemporary female personality. I draw upon them often as I describe the relationship between the female condition and what we call madness, that divinely menacing behavior from which eloquence and exhausting demands society protects itself through reason and force. This is a book about the dramatically increasing numbers of American women of all classes and races who are seen or who see themselves as neurotic or psychotic and who seek psychotherapeutic help and are psychiatrically hospitalized. This is a book about the many whys of such help-seeking behavior, about what is experienced and viewed as in need of help, and about how these women are or aren't helped. Chapter 1 and 10 discuss the basic psychological dimensions of female personality in our culture. Chapter 1 presents the lives and psychiatric histories of 4 women based on autobiographical, biographical, and case history material. These and modern women in general are viewed in terms of what growing up female in the family means. The mother-daughter relationship is analyzed, as is the role played by mythological or historical heroines such as the Virgin Mary or Joan of Arc, in female experiences of normality and abnormality. Chapter 1 describes how female reproductive biology, patriarchal culture, and the modern parent-daughter relationship have so combined as to ensure such characteristically female behaviors and ideas as self-sacrifice, masochism, reproductive narcissism, compassionate maternality, dependency, sexual timidity, and unhappiness, father worship, and the overwhelming dislike and devaluation of women. Chapter 2 and 3 view both the mental asylum and private therapy as recapitulations or mirrors of the female experience in the family. Clinicians, most of whom are men, all too often treat their patients, most of whom are women, as wives and daughters, rather than as people, treat them as if female misery, by biological definition, exists outside the realm of what is considered human or adult. A double standard of mental health and humanity, one for women, another for men, seems to good-naturedly and unscientifically dominate most theories and treatments of women and men. Traditional and contemporary clinical theories and practices are reviewed in Chapter 3. A new definition, or rather a different way of understanding female psychiatric symptoms such as depression or frigidity, male psychiatric symptoms such as alcohol and drug addiction or sociopathic personality, and what we call madness or schizophrenia is presented in Chapter 2. The types of behaviors that are hospitalized in America are also related to caste, sex and race, age, class, and marital status. Chapter 4 and the appendix present an analysis of our nation's mental illness statistics from 1950 to 1969. These chapters document the extent to which women, more than men, and in greater numbers than their existence in the general population would predict, are involved in careers as psychiatric patients. Women who are having nervous breakdowns, crying fits, temper tantrums, paranoid delusions, women who attempt suicide, who take unknown quantities of drugs to smother their anxieties, their hostilities, their ambitions, their panics, their sexual unhappiness, and their visions. In 1968, American women comprised 62% of the adult ages 18 to 64 population in outpatient clinics. 61% of the adults in private hospitals and 60% of all of the adults in general psychiatric wards. Women of all ages comprise 50% of the adults in state and county hospitals, where they returned more frequently and were detained for longer periods than their male counterparts. Adult women certainly compose 2/3 of the patients in community mental health centers and in private psychotherapeutic treatment. And most patients over 65 in asylums or in old age homes are, of course, women. Our society does not overly like old age or women. Chapters 4 through 9 describe the patient careers of 60 women whom I interviewed about their experiences in psychiatric hospitals and private or clinic outpatient therapy, experiences which took place from 1945 to 1971 in America and England. The women I spoke with were of European, Latin American, and African descent. Their ages ranged from 17 to 70. Their sexual, marital, maternal, and political involvements were equally far ranging. Only a minority of these women experienced what I would call genuine states of madness. Most were simply unhappy and self destructive in typically and approved female ways. Their experiences made it very clear to me that help seeking or help needing behavior is not particularly valued or understood in our culture. Help seekers are pitied, mistrusted, tranquilized, physically beaten, given shock therapy, lied to, yelled at, and ultimately neglected. And all for their own good. Many women in American state mental asylums participated in sex role typed slave labor, i.e., they worked as domestics for no or token payment. Many were also medically abused or neglected, sexually repressed or exploited, ridiculed and abandoned by family and professional establishments alike, and given very little therapy, verbal or otherwise. Many women who were lucky or rich enough to buy the best verbal treatment therapists could offer were not always or often understood or helped. It has never been my intention to romanticize madness or to confuse it with political or cultural revolution, certainly because of the pain our mistreatment of it ensures, certainly because of the pain that it may intrinsically involve. Such pain is to be understood and respected, but never romanticized. Most weeping, depressed women, most anxious and terrified women are neither about to seize the means of production and reproduction, nor are they any more creatively involved with problems of cosmic powerlessness, evil, and love than in the rest of the human race. I speak in many voices throughout this book. As a psychological researcher, theoretician, and clinician, and as a literary and philosophical person, a lover of poetry and myth. What the fuck does that have to do with psychology? In bringing you this book, I feel like a time traveler turned messenger, a bearer of bad news. I wonder how will you receive it? I wonder what will you do? Well, first of all, I'm going to repudiate your introduction of women as mythological creatures, which is very bizarre to pick Demeter and her daughters as the starting point for humanity. It's kind of weird. Anyway, that's after I'm going to eat. And I will come back at some other time with chapter 1, Why Madness. That's all, bruvs. That's all. Okay.